Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat Show. Hello, listeners. This is your host today, Bill Banham. And joining me on this episode, returning to the show, in fact, is the amazing, fantastic, wonderful Dr. Rochelle Haynes. Dr. Rochelle is founder and CEO at Crowd Potential Consulting. She's chair of the College Oversight Board at London Churchill College. She's a senior lecturer at Nottingham Trent University, and she does loads of other cool things. She's also an author of an amazing book, which we're going to focus on in today's conversation. And I should just add that she is my friend because she's super cool. Dr. Rochelle, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Bill. I'm so glad to be back here. I'm so glad to speak to you again. Thanks for having me.
So for those folks who haven't listened to our previous conversations, why don't you start by taking a minute or two and just introducing yourself, telling our listeners a bit about your academic and career background?
Sure. So my background started really in psychology. I'm always interested in how people work, what engages people, and how culture transform people's feelings in space. In terms of my academic background, I have a master's in human resource management and a PhD in international human resource management. And my interest has always been, my main focus, or what I really enjoy, is expatriate work. I like to look at when people from different races, people from different countries are working in a background in a new country. And that kind of led into my research, surprisingly, on digital nomadism, which led to also looking at my research into remote work and flexibility. So my current role is as a workforce transformation specialist and a leadership transformation specialist. And that really started from the research and the consulting that I was doing in that space of digital nomadism and remote work. But now it's extended so far beyond that. So before it started as, okay, the workforce is changing. The workforce, they're prioritizing work-life balance and well-being. And clearly there's a shift taking place. But this isn't being talked about enough. That was in 2018. So me and my business partner, Jeremy Blaine, we did a global study where we spoke about the world of work not being ready for the changes to come. Main one being remote work and just thinking about transforming their people management practices that would allow them to work with different types of employees or different types of workers. So, for example, independent contractors. Now, we all know what happened in 2020 when the world shut down suddenly. And that's where, of course, that demand for more flexible work occurred. Since then, it's transferred. It's kind of, my scope has widened a lot more to talent engagement on the whole, because all of these changes affect talent engagement. The younger generations are demanding more flexible work. They're demanding work that fits with their lifestyle. They want more autonomy over their work. And that's led to a lot of company concerns and crises around how do we keep our younger generations, or how do we keep our best and brightest minds in place? And because of that, it's required leaderships to stop and take a step back and think about how they lead, what they prioritize in the work process, but also have they created a work environment that's actually suitable to different types of workers, but also appealing to different generations of workers. So that's kind of the scope of my work. And I've done that internationally. I've worked with clients all over the world, from Asia to Europe, Caribbean, North and South America. And I continue my consulting alongside my lecturing at Nottingham Trent University.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HR Chat Podcast. If you enjoy the audio content we produce, you'll love our articles on the HR Gazette. Learn more at hrgazette.com. And now, back to the show.
And at some point, you get time to sleep, I'm guessing. Okay, very good.
Yes.
On the remote work piece, on the flexible work piece, where are we at right now? So, we're a long way away from the situation during the pandemic, in terms of everybody had to work remotely, and unless there were certain jobs, and indeed there was that war for certain types of talent. Since then, we have, for example, seen lots of knowledge workers being replaced by AI, lots of developers, for example, who were previously commanding during the pandemic times huge salaries. Now they are scrambling to get work. Is it now a buyer's market? Is it far more acceptable for employers to say, no, you know what, it's not just about being on the same time zone. You've actually got to physically come to the office a couple of days a week. What's the lay of the land? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing some changes and, of course, being influenced by wider leadership and wider trends in the market. And one of the things that we've seen is that despite this pushback against flexibility, pushback even against DEI, which is also affected in this situation, one of the things we tend to highlight is that there's not a battle between remote work and in-house work. It should never have been a battle between the two in the first place. To me, the wider conversation was around providing wider access to work. It wasn't an either or. It was a case where we were saying provide more options and allow the employee as well enough freedom to also dictate how they want to work. Whereas in the past, if we look at first industrial revolution, and in many ways we're still trying to manage like that, it was always the employer told the employee what to do, how to do it, when to show up, and so forth. But the younger generations are showing that this isn't necessarily the case. We definitely see in tech, of course, we've seen the mass layoffs. We've seen companies demanding that their clients come back into office. But alongside that, we're still seeing a demand for a better quality of work, a better work culture, mental health and well-being, and flexibility. So I find that a lot of these situations and trends, they don't replace what is let's say the evolution that's going on in the background. Sometimes leadership, let's say country leadership or otherwise, might influence that and put harder stance. But even certain leadership are finite, and then that trend still continues. So we have seen definitely the challenge there. But at the same time, we still see companies struggling with, let's say, engaging younger people. Younger people, for example, quitting very easily Gen Z if they're not happy with the work environment. They're walking out, if they're not happy with the type of work, if it's not very interesting, if it's not providing some element of flexibility, then they're saying, well, no, this is not for me. So in that way, even alongside, especially in industries, because we're not saying that remote work as well is suitable for all industries, but we're definitely saying younger generations, and even within, let's call it the boomer generation, they're demanding for different options when it comes to working. So despite companies, let's say, dragging people back in, let's say, doing these office, let's say, return to work programs, we're seeing wider and wider surveys and trends are constantly indicating not just a trend of, let's say, quiet quitting or whatever the case might be, but also indicating that while people are completing their day jobs, they're actively looking for new posts. They're actively creating their own work situation so they can escape a lot of that. And of course, the economic situation tends to play an influence as well in terms of what on the time frame that people choose to move on, or if they choose to move on. But definitely, as the environment changes, the mindsets are not going to go backwards.
In 2025, being prepared to support your employees during times of crisis is more vital than ever. The Crisis Ready Workplace program, designed by Dr. Bill Howitt and brought to you in partnership with HR News Canada and HR Law Canada, and supported by the HR Gazette, equips professionals and leaders with the knowledge, skills, and tools needed to effectively navigate workplace crisis, ultimately boosting employee well-being and enhancing organizational performance. Crisis Ready Workplace will take leaders beyond conventional risk preparedness to redefine what it means to lead through uncertainty. Expect to dive deep into interactive sessions, groundbreaking strategies, and transformative insights designed to prepare organizations for any challenge. This comprehensive program is pre-approved for 14 hours of CPD credits by HRPA, CPHR, and CPD International, and empowers leaders in crisis preparation, foundational knowledge, and supportive training. Sign up today at crisisready.ca. And now back to this episode of the HR Chat Show.
Okay, Very good. Thank you very much. You mentioned the rollbacks when it comes to DEI as part of your answer just now. What impact do you think that could have on organizations in terms of the quality of the talent that they can attract, in terms of its impact on company culture? We're seeing this from companies such as McDonald's and Meta. Obviously, Trump's tried to mandate this throughout governmental organizations. What are your thoughts there?
It's a sad day. let's say that. When I first read about the repeals and the reinforcement of certain mindsets, especially DEI, because we know over the years we've done such hard work and good work to get certain, let's say, elements of the workforce, certain talent groups, being able to better access the workforce. And again, these changes around the workforce in terms of flexibility and otherwise, and DIY programs, DEI programs are around providing wider access to work for people who typically wouldn't have that amount of access. So I think one of the things that I've seen is that a lot of companies, yes, some are enforcing let's say these mandates, especially we're speaking North America, of course, because they have to follow what's going on there. What I'm also seeing as well is you have persons kind of finding other ways to ensure that they can still get the benefits that they do from DEI, because most studies on DEI shows that diversity contributes to a company's profits and well-being. And despite the narratives that are being painted out there, most tech companies depend on diverse workforces, Google included, Amazon included. They depend on diverse workforces in order to excel and thrive. I've seen I've been reading studies that's also been showing that there's a trend of some of those, let's say, talent groups or talent, like individuals, relocating as well, where they don't feel like they can thrive in certain environments. So I do think in the short term, it's very crass, it's very disruptive, but in the long term, if companies continue along this line, then they will feel the negative outcomes down the road. So I think it's really important to keep our eye on this and make sure that we're still holding to our core values despite the disruptive leadership that's being taken place.
Okay, thank you very much. Rochelle, let's switch focus now. What is OpenHR and the OpenHR mindset?
Yeah. Okay, so OpenHR came out of the research that we did in 2018. And basically, we went to different countries and we put ourselves in the remote workers' position. We wanted to know what were the pain points that companies faced when they dealt with independent contractors or open talent platform workers and so forth. And that allowed us to see the struggles that companies were having in terms of unclear objectives, in terms of in terms of compliance issues and worries and those sort of things. So what we did was we created a framework called OpenHR that was a roadmap for companies to help them navigate how to better engage a blended workforce. And by a blended workforce, we mean a mixture of full-time talent, part-time talent, online, offline, AI, and independent contractors. So where you have a workforce that is made up of various types of talent, how do you make sure you're engaging everybody and providing an environment where you can thrive? So in that framework, we created 4 rooms called Open Rules, Open Tools, Open Skills, and Open Thrills, and on a foundation of the open culture. And that really guides companies through, for example, the rules tells companies about how to ensure they have the right compliance issues sorted, make sure they have the right future workforce strategy and create the right work environment for excellent work execution. Whereas the Open Tools talks about how you create a digital framework that you feel protected in. So, for example, if you have worries around cybersecurity, if you want to know how to apply your your AI, talk about things like that. Open Skills talks about, okay, what are the skills that companies need as they evolve to these, let's say, more modern and more inclusive practices. Whereas Open Thrills is like, how can you make sure everyone in your workforce is included, feels rewarded, and recognized for their contribution and role? And the The heart of the open HR mindset is creating wider access to work and an environment which provides good work. So where you have a blended workforce, ensuring that everyone in your workforce, from full-time, part-time to independent, everyone feels like first-class citizens rather than second-class citizens, making sure they have the tools that they need to do the job, making sure they're being paid appropriately, making sure your company is operating within the parameters of your compliance needs. So OpenHR is a full-scale map for clients, a full-scale map for companies to consider how do you actually create a workforce that allows you to engage with different types of talent at the same time.
This episode of the HR Chat podcast is supported by My Staff Shop, the UK's only employee-owned employee benefit provider. We provide a range of competitive and flexible employee benefit solutions to help you improve your employee value proposition, from exclusive deals and discounts to help your people stretch their salaries, to effective reward and recognition programs, and a comprehensive health and well-being offering. We pride ourselves on our friendly and collaborative way of working, putting the interest of our clients at the heart of everything we do. Learn more at mystaffshop.com. Thanks, and now back to the HR Chat Show.
Gosh, I think you've done that before. Very good. Okay. You mentioned the skills-based approach in your book. How does OpenHR link to that?
So one of the reasons why we highlight the skills-based approach is because OpenHR helps companies to understand how they can benefit from, let's say, not only prioritizing a job-based approach, let's say hiring according to job descriptions, boxing employees into these very singular roles or linear roles, but also where you're interacting with independent contractors. Most independent or let's call them open talent. Most open talent, persons working as open talent, they operate on a project basis. So that's where the skills-based organization comes in, because by learning how to operate in a way where you are able to identify the skills you need for particular projects right across the organization, then you can deploy different types of talent depending on who has the best skills, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to keep you in this very linear position because you're an accountant, so you will only work in accounting. But if you have an accountant who, let's say, is a part-time graphic designer, or maybe they're a social media influencer, perhaps they might be good for a project in another part of the organization where you might pair them to work with an independent contractor to solve the problem because they have the best skills. So OpenHR tends to, let's say, promote the skills-based approach as well, because it allows the organization or guides the organization into how they can, one, identify the skills that they can deploy right across the organization, but also use open talent to solve some of their deepest challenges.
Just a side note, or just a follow-up question that occurs to me. If someone is hired to be an accountant, and then their HR team says, hey, we noticed that you've got these other skills and you can do graphic design, and then they go and do a little graphic design project with an entirely different team, can they actually be judged on that? Is that part of their performance review? Should it be?
They could possibly. You can have it around, let's say, depends on and it requires a conversation really with that employee, understanding what are their wider interests. So in many ways, I think the performance appraisal conversation should probably become a bit more exploratory, because one of the things that younger generations are saying, or let's start with the other side. Most employers, they criticize the younger generation as being lazy. I often challenge that and say, is your employee lazy or are they checked out? And when you speak to Gen Z, for example, a lot of younger employees are bored within the job. However, let's say if you have a younger person working in the accounting field, you have an appraisal meeting where you understand what are their wider interests and what are the problems that we've been trying to solve in this company. If you have, let's say, a database or a heat map, let's say, of those wider skills, and you are allowing your employee to work on various projects, then of course they're still meeting their accounting requirements, but at the same time, even those accounting skills might be transferable to solve wider problems. So it's up to an organization to decide how they want to reward that, really, and it should be rewarded.
Okay, and you've been doing lots of launches. So, for example, I wasn't able to make your launch in London. I'd sent you a note saying, I'm terribly sorry. I really wanted to go to that. That looked like a lot of fun. Generally speaking, what's been the response to OpenHR so far?
Yeah. It's been pretty good so far. It's definitely doing really great on the chart. So when we first launched the OpenHR book, the next day we made UK #1 bestseller. The next day we made top US release, and we still do not know if we made US #1 bestseller. We know we made #2 bestseller, but it was because we weren't really following the charts. We were in Singapore at the time doing another launch. So we won't know if we actually made it. So yeah, it's been doing really well. It's made #1 in India. It's now an international bestseller. We've had businesses reaching out to us and saying that they're really, really happy and grateful, and they find that the book is a very useful guide. So for example, Gigged AI has been promoting the book a lot on social media platforms because they're a talent platform organization. And they had an employee who was hired recently, and they recommended the book to that employee. And that employee reached out to me separately and said, hey, I'm very new to this role and working in this way. And I just want to say I'm really grateful to the guidance that you've provided in this book. I'm finding it very helpful in my new role. So one of the things about the book is that it's extremely practical. We outline roadmaps, we outline questionnaires, beginner questions, sort of 90-day plans that companies can look at. So we've really been getting positive feedback on how useful it is rather than academic. It's a very useful roadmap for organizations. And I'm very proud of that because I think a lot of companies are always interested in the what to. I think as academics and also in general, as a speaker, we're very good at saying to companies, this is what needs to happen for change, but then the how to, and then companies like, oh, great, this sounds excellent. Now, how do we do it? And the book is a real how-to guide to do that.
Okay. So Dr. Rochelle Haynes, international bestseller. What about that? And if organizations wanted to work with you, if they wanted to start their OpenHR transformation journey, how would they work with you? What does that approach look like?
Well, usually they'd reach out to us. Some of them would go to our website, and so my website, crowdpotential.co.uk, or they reach out via LinkedIn, and we would set up a meeting and discuss the particular pain points they're having or areas. And a lot of the time, a lot of our work tends to start with an organizational diagnosis, understanding, well, how is talent deployed in the organization? How often is this talent used? Where are the areas that might be a possibility for different groups to come together, but really just understanding the anatomy of your hire, or the anatomy of how you use individual talent groups. And from there, we might go on to look at, okay, what are the key priority areas? And sometimes we do full-scale transformations with trying to make sure companies are secure, let's say in the open rules, tools, skills, and thrills area. Or sometimes companies might have a very specific need, perhaps open tools, where they want to engage in a digital transformation process that's actually effective, because 80% of digital transformation processes tend to fail. Research concludes that over and over. So sometimes they might hire us specifically for the open tools. Maybe sometimes they hire us specifically to help them to upskill their HR departments to ensure that they can work with different groups of talent and make sure they have the right future workforce practices in place to do that. So yeah, it usually starts with that initial meeting, identifying the individual client needs, and then we might do it on a consulting basis, or maybe it's a keynote we might do, or maybe specific workshops on the pain point areas where we sit down and work with the client to solve those.
Okay, so just to recap, crowdpotential.co.uk, or reach out to Rochelle on LinkedIn. She is very good at responding, as I know, because we send each other messages from time to time. Okay, anything else you'd like to add? Anything else you'd like to say to our audience before we wrap up our conversation for today?
Make sure you get out there and buy the book. Check out the book. Hopefully you enjoy reading it. It's a very practical business read, so hopefully you enjoy it. And it's available on Amazon.
It's available wherever you want to get your best top-selling books. Okay, cool. So that just leaves me to say for today, Rochelle, my friend, lovely catching up with you. Lovely to see you. Thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be back. Great to see you again.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, Why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.